You know, they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, you'll do nothing. You'll do fucking nothing. Not one of you'll do nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. You know, I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Next year, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up? What is up, MCR family? Another daily edition of the show, live on YouTube, obviously podcast form on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc. It's Mixed Combat Radio. I am Matt, the Hipster Hunter. Obviously, going to be talking about all of the fights that's happened this weekend. It's review day. I'm hyped because there's some really good fights. Cameron Gillen's going to be jumping on very shortly, our co-host. Shout out to Cameron Gillen over at Boxing Monthly and other outlets. Go check out his YouTube channel as well, Cameron Gillen. Definitely is going to be posting up a bunch of interviews. Also, there's an interview with J-Rock, Julian Williams, on his channel that you should definitely go check out. But anyways, digressing. Obviously, it's the Daniel Jacobs, Sergiy Derevyanchenko show, mainly. Obviously, we have other fights like Regis Prograis, Terry Flanagan, Ivan Branchik versus Anthony Yiggett, and also Felix Alvarado picking up a vacant IBF light flyweight title that we definitely need to talk on because that arguably fight of the year. Definitely up there in my opinion. Cameron saying Matt shaved his beard. It's a new day, a new era.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Don't worry, Connor. Just me. But anyways, obviously, I may wait a little bit till Cameron gets on, but it's definitely was an interesting weekend because it was one that I didn't think it was going to produce as good of action as it did. I thought we were going to see a lot more of, let's say, the Alberto Machado Yandel Evans fight, which we're obviously going to get into, which was a fight that I think we all sort of knew what was going to happen, and it exactly happened. Machado knocked out Evans in the first round. But other fights like Jacobs, Derevyanchenko turned out to be much more of a competitive, close, tight fight than I think what we probably expected, either if you were picking Derevyanchenko or Jacobs. I think we got a little more in the middle, where it was a much more, like I said, competitive, fun fight. Even the Prograis Flanagan fight, which I think Prograis dominated in a way, was competitive in others. And I definitely can't wait to talk about that. And obviously, the Anthony Yiggett performance was truly inspiring, to be honest. I didn't think he was going to, A, be that competitive, and B, survive that long with the gruesome injury that he had on his eye. It's just, that's probably one of the worst eyes that have been swollen that I've seen in some time. That was alien-like. That was close to like Dennis Lebedev, Alfredo Angulo, guys like that who would just, again, alien-like. Like there was another head that was starting to form out of their skull. Just insane stuff there. From what I have seen, there's no viewerships yet or ratings yet for any of these fights, particularly the HBO one. I'm definitely intrigued by that, by what the rating was for this fight, especially since it's one of the last HBO fights. And briefly, I will say this: Jim Lampley was all over the place on the broadcast, and especially with the Heather Hardy fight against Shelley Vincent. He was just saying some questionable things in framing of certain subjects. It was just odd. But anyways, to digress from that all, I'm joined obviously by the illustrious Mr. Cameron Gillen. Cameron, how you doing today?
What's going on, man? Just want to make sure my volume's not too high.
No, you're perfect.
Oh, yeah, good. Yeah, man, what's going on? Looking forward to getting to these topics. Do you know what? The only fight I've still not watched is the Jacobs fight. That's the only fight I've not watched because I actually, a lot of people were asking me why I did this, but I decided to watch the Prograis Flanagan fight instead of that. Mm-hmm. Looking back, it was a bad mistake. It is what it is.
That's okay, though. I mean, it's definitely one of those that, obviously, I think it's probably the bigger fight of the weekend, just because of Jacobs probably being the biggest commodity that fought this weekend. But it's one that's pretty easy in sort of nit tuck to sort of dissect. So it's not like I desperately need your analysis of it, but it's okay. What was sort of your standout fight of the weekend in your mind before we sort of go into anything?
I don't know. Obviously, Baranchik Yigit was a decent fight. I watched that one as well. But Machado's first round destruction, that does it for me. Definitely performance of the weekend. But I thought the Prograis fight, it was very flat. If anybody's watched it, they'll understand what I'm saying. It was very flat. Prograis really, the sort of tempo that was set from the start of the fight was really kind of the tempo that was throughout the fight. Prograis really didn't have to do much. Didn't have to take much risk because he was just drawing Flanagan on, setting little traps, and he was walking Flanagan onto his left hands. And it was a very dominant, but it was a very dominant performance, but not dominant at the same time in terms of offense and work rate. Prograis was just doing things he does. What I like about Prograis is, and I said this on Twitter after the fight, he's never on the center line. Like, it's so hard to pin him down to range because he's constantly moving, he's constantly circling. He's always moving his head, he's always moving his upper body. He's very tough. He's fast, he's athletic. Steve Farhood said it best a while back. He said that Prograis got that star appeal. And he definitely has that star appeal. He's got the personality, he's got the potential, and he's got the fan-friendly style. And if he keeps winning, he will be a star. I just really liked how, he really just wasn't in range. Flanagan just couldn't land anything on him. Bit surprised he didn't stop him because I thought once he landed that overhand left, I thought, Flanagan, he might go in for the kill because Flanagan, for me, looked like he just had nothing left. He was clueless in there. He's just very limited in basic, Flanagan. He's never been a fighter. I think, we said in the last show, this is a guy who's not got any wins against any elite opposition or anywhere close to elite. His best win's still Magdaleno, probably. And, he stepped up twice and been beat. So, I know a few people said that Flanagan's durable, and that's all he is, really. Flanagan is durable. Pretty routine win for Prograis. But it was the first round, the sort of thing for Prograis now. The tests are going to come in the next sort of few rounds. But now I was a bit disappointed in the fight in terms of overall, like the action and things. But I thought Prograis looked good.
Yeah, let's dive into that right now since we're on it. I sort of definitely echo what you're saying about it being a flat performance in a way. It was Prograis in cruise control. And I know you probably spent some time in gyms just because of the amount of interviews you've done. But for anyone out there, if you've ever not been in a boxing gym, there's times where you see somebody that's truly levels above their sparring partner, and they'll do what Prograis does. Really use that waist movement and head movement, dip off the center line, and roll under shots consistently, and not really throw back. It's purely just to sort of evade your shots and make you look sort of silly. And it's a way to sort of, A, practice their defense, and B, to not really hurt a sparring partner that's levels below them. That's what this fight looked like. It looked like Prograis was in there and he realized, again, like it was a sparring match, like, oh, my sparring partner is not really up to, the stuff here. I'm going to just, dial it back down and just, move my body a lot and just evade his action and not really throw enough back in terms of counters. That's how I sort of saw the fight. Still dominant. Still, like you said, Prograis' ability to slip off that center line is truly sublime. But there's holes. I mean, I don't think you can really come away from a Prograis fight ever thinking he's not hittable. He just doesn't keep his guard up. And when he does get hit, he has to reset. And that, to me, is a potential issue because, to me, he's a rhythm fighter, almost like James Toney-like, where he has to sort of dip and bob and weave into a rhythm and work his counters into that rhythm. And when he gets caught with the jab, or gets caught with anything, you see him reset. You see him sort of, straighten up again, go back to the center line, go back to sort of a traditional stance, and then start working on that rhythm again. And guys that are at the higher level than obviously a Flanagan, they might be able to capitalize on that. I don't know if a Josh Taylor, because to me, really, that's the only guy in the tournament that's going to give him a real, competitive fight. I don't know if he's the guy to do it, but somebody will. Somebody's going to figure out Prograis, in my opinion, because he is a rhythm fighter. And if you just upset that rhythm, he, in my opinion, will probably start to unravel in terms of efficiency. Obviously, we haven't seen that yet, but I see glimpses of that.
I think there's a few guys. I think Baranchyk stylistically, he's not the most technical fighter out there. He's still learning himself and that. But I think stylistically, he is going to be a handful for anybody at 140. I'm not saying he beats a lot, but I just think his style, he's tough. It's grueling when you fight him. I think his style, he can punch. And I think if he can really rough up Prograis, I think he'll be a bit of a handful for him. I think Josh Taylor's, he's a good fighter. But the problem with 140 is there's no standout guy. That's why it's kind of hard to sit here and say who's going to beat Prograis, who's going to be able to land the shots to be that much better, because there's just no standout guy. So in that sense, I get what you're saying. But I think stylistically, I think Baranchyk maybe the fight gives him some problems, because I think Baranchyk he's just aggressive. He comes forward, he lands big shots. And I think he's kind of that style that Prograis would definitely have trouble kind of keeping at bay, like he did with Flanagan.
I actually think the opposite. I think Prograis will probably be a guy that does better with a super aggressive opponent. I think he's a guy that works off of your game a little bit. And if you're coming at him with everything you have, like a Baranchyk does, who's sort of like a mini Provodnikov, I think Prograis is going to start styling on him. Especially since Baranchyk, even though he has defensive flaws, they're quite different flaws than Prograis. Baranchyk has zero head movement, in my opinion. His only defensive tactic is to shell up and absorb your shot, use his sort of guard to, sort of deflect your punches. But other than that, Baranchyk doesn't have head movement, waist movement, the way that other defensive-minded fighters do. I think Prograis would be able to sort of land at will against Baranchyk. I think Barancyk's going to have a lot more trouble landing against Prograis. I just think he will. I do see guys like maybe Jose Ramirez, because they have a really good jab, really good fundamentals, and still a little bit more of that aggressive side like we want with a Baranchyk, but obviously more technically sound. I think he might give Prograis some issues. Josh Taylor, I think, is still a 50-50 fight. But other than that, like you said, there's really no standouts in this division. That's why, those top three guys, in my opinion, all 50-50. Obviously, the Alex Saucedo-Maurice Hooker fight coming up, that's going to be interesting if Alex Saucedo comes out and really dominates or looks really impressive against Maurice Hooker. Saucedo might be a guy in the division we really aren't talking about enough. But again, I think that Prograis is one of those guys where he does go into cruise control a lot. And obviously, I think a lot of people have found out about Prograis because of the Ndongo fight, which was so quick. But if you look at Prograis throughout his career, he is sort of this guy where he goes into first or second gear, and if he gets you hurt, maybe he finishes you, maybe he sort of swarms you. But other than that, he sort of just goes in there and fights his game. Maybe that's due to the lack of real bodies in front of him, real opponents in front of him, or that's just him. Like maybe I've compared Prograis to Anthony Yarde before. For example, Cameron. Obviously, Prograis is much better than Anthony Yarde, but sort of that same, I'm not going to use the word cockiness, but that same confidence and belief in their defensive prowess, I think might be their downfall. Cameron? Cameron, are you there? You are muted, Cameron. Oh, no. Did his internet drop out again? Whatever happened to Cameron? I'm going to move on. Since we were talking about Branchik, let's go to Branchik versus Anthony Igit. I thought this was, again, a much more competitive fight than what I previously thought. I thought Anthony had really nothing to really bring to the table. I felt like he was sloppy in the ring from what I've seen. Didn't really have the power. I didn't really see him as being this durable guy. And it turned out to be that. And Branchik had to work for this win. Both guys were throwing hard punches, hard combinations on the inside. Anthony definitely worked an in-and-out game trying to make the best of it. But once the eye starts swelling up, once he became sort of significantly, hampered by that lack of vision, Branchik started landing more and more shots, started being a little more vicious, and definitely I'm glad the doctor stopped it in the 7th round. It was a really good stoppage, let's be honest. Regis saying, Matt, I like the way Prograis goes from left to right, the way he bobs and weaves. Yeah, it's definitely I always say guys like James Toney are the best at this. Like when you look at a prime James Toney, the way he would bob and weave on the inside and in mid-range was truly amazing. You can't teach that. That has to be sort of a talent you have, that sort of waist movement and reflexes and the timing of it. It takes super elite athleticism to do that. Looks like Cameron dropped off, unfortunately. R.I.P. Cameron. Gotta get that better internet. But anyways, moving on. Nothing really else on the undercard to speak of that I want to speak of, at least. Moving to the HBO card, Daniel Jacobs versus Sergiy Derevyanchenko. Again, a competitive fight. From what I've talked about so far. Derevyanchenko, after getting knocked down in that first round. Beautiful overhand right by Daniel Jacobs. Real vicious shot. Derevyanchenko got back up, I think in that second or third round, and he won it, and it became a real competitive fight throughout that. Daniel Jacobs, to his credit, though, defensively, is just hard to hit. Because he's just super long. He's tall. He's like for a guy like Derevyanchenko who's so much smaller than him, physically, like just from a distance perspective, he really has to work in on the inside to get his shots in. So Daniel Jacobs had that advantage. But on top of that, I think Daniel Jacobs' head movement has improved. I think his ability to roll and slip with shots has improved overall, in my opinion. I thought Jacobs won a little bit more convincingly than some of these judges thought. Like one gave 6-6, and obviously with the knockdown, it favors Jacobs. I thought it was more of a 7-5 or an 8-4. I thought Derevyanchenko was missing a lot of his shots, to be quite honest. But he was taking rounds off. This was a fight of spurts. This wasn't a fight of consistent action. So when that happens, I think it becomes harder to judge a round, to be honest. When there's a guy consistently working in a round or throughout a fight and he's consistently winning the rounds, it's very easy to say, okay, he's winning. He's throwing more punches. He's landing more punches. He's being more active. He's being more efficient. Like all those sort of metrics line up. But when you have a fight that's of spurts, it's a fight where Jacobs will come in and land 2 of 5 shots, and Sergiy Derevyanchenko will land 2 of 6 shots or 1 of 5. How do you really compare that? And most of these shots being good body shots, it makes it really hard to judge. However, I thought Jacobs was in control throughout. The rounds that Derevyanchenko won, it's because he sort of pressed on the gas a little bit and threw more in combination. When he dialed it back a little bit and took it more to a boxing affair, Daniel Jacobs clearly was the better boxer. And this made me 100% hyped for Canelo fight, Demetrius Andrade fight. Daniel Jacobs he's that guy, man. And also the monopoly of the middleweight division at the very top. All of the middleweight champions are now on DAZN. Definitely a narrative to look at. Sort of stitching to this in the news recently. Triple G is allegedly in talks per Tom Loeffler, and I think it was Behind the Gloves, Michelle Phelps, that they are in negotiations or looking into a Callum Smith fight, which I have to admit, that's some boss shit from Triple G, because Canelo moving up, fighting the WBA regular champion in Rocky Fielding. Triple G potentially moving up and fighting the super champion who beat Rocky Fielding and Callum Smith. A little bit of a boss move, I will be honest. That's a little bit of a, I'm better than you sort of move. I liked it. The pettiness of that potential move, I do like, though it's 100% a tough fight for Triple G. Though I'm just saying, Triple G going to DAZN, sort of other middleweights, maybe like a Rob Brandt moving over to DAZN since he's now a regular champion himself with the WBA. These are all things to sort of look at in sort of a more of a macro sense for the middleweight division. But shout out to Daniel Jacobs, great win. I thought his defense improved. And also, quick shout out to Andre Rozier and just the cornering of, or the relationship dynamic between Daniel Jacobs and Andre Rozier in the corner. I said this on Twitter, but if you're a fighter out there, if you're an amateur fighter or you're a pro out there, go watch how those two guys react to each other, communicate to each other in the corner. It is, in my opinion, the best way to corner. Clear, concise, specific tactical instructions, communication back and forth. Daniel Jacobs, relaying what he is seeing in there, and vice versa. I like that. It's just a really good relationship and dynamic between them in the corner, and one I think that all fighters should sort of aspire to be quite honest. The co-main event, Alberto Machado versus Yandel Evans. God, R.I.P. Yandel Evans. His 2 step-up fights, 2 of them first-round knockout losses. Javier Fortuna, now Alberto Machado. Obviously, we sort of know what Yandel Evans is now, unfortunately, and to be honest, he's not really the story here. Machado is. And unfortunately, before Cameron dropped off, he was right. Machado, probably performance of the weekend. Even though it's Yandel Evans, and we now have a really firm idea of what he is as a fighter and understanding of it, Machado is still a insane puncher in the division. He is gigantic for 130 pounds. And tell me that all of you do not want to see him fight the Miguel Berchelt Mickey Roman winner, because I think Berchelt's going to win that. So Berchelt versus Machado, to me, has fight of the decade written all over it. And Machado being a southpaw, tall, long, rangy boxer puncher who definitely has great fundamentals, great power, goes to the body, has killer instinct. Definitely just, again, somebody to sort of look at and realize he is quickly becoming a force in the boxing world at 20-0. Someone to sort of pay attention to. Heather Hardy defeating Shelly Vincent in the rematch. To me, a very clear unanimous decision win for Heather Hardy. I gave her, I think, maybe 8 rounds or so. Just outboxed Shelly Vincent. Shout out to Shelly Vincent, though. She definitely made it a tough fight at parts, I should say. But by round 4 or 5, Heather Hardy figured out the range, was timing her, didn't really want to engage in a brawl, and she was smart. There's one thing I want to say in sort of a critique of this fight is that we can sort of tell that Heather Hardy is getting up there in age. She's in her mid-30s, in the low weight classes. Those are all things to consider. Fighters in the low weight classes usually have a shorter prime, a shorter career. Athleticism drops a little bit quicker for them, and it's a little bit more of a major factor for the low weight classes. And to me, she looked a little bit slower in there. Her combinations looked a little bit slower than at times. And obviously, she's still undefeated. But if I'm Heather Hardy, look towards an Amanda Serrano fight, look towards a Cindy Serrano fight, look towards a Katie Taylor fight, look towards sort of a cash-out fight, because I don't think you have that much longer in the sport, even though you've really, I think, done an awesome job in the sport and lifted up women's boxing as a whole. Salute to you, Heather Hardy. Moving on to the Kubrat Pulev Hui Fury fight. Robisky saying, Matt, Amanda Serrano signed with DAZN. Yes, she did. And she kind of left a, kind of like an FU tweet to Showtime, in a way. It was just odd. But anyways, digressing, the Pulev versus Fury fight. Man, Pulev, look, he was dominant in this fight, in my opinion, especially after round 3 or 4, when he started timing Fury consistently with the right hand. Fury really had nothing in terms of power to sort of push Pulev off. However, Pulev is still so just awful in terms of watching experience. As a consumer, this fight was tough to get through. But now Pulev is the mandatory to Anthony Joshua's IBF belt. What else do you want me to say? Shout out to Pulev. I just think both these guys are just bad. Like, they're not entertaining in any way. And this fight was exactly what you thought two very unentertaining heavyweight fighters would produce. A unentertaining heavyweight fight. Salute to them. Johnny in the chat saying, OMG, Huey is so trash. That was the worst fight I have ever seen. Ever. I didn't say it. I'm just...
It's bullshit.
Usyk said it. It's bullshit. God, that was just so bad. Let's talk about something that was amazing. The Felix Alvarado versus Randy Patel Corrine fight. I know I pronounced that wrong right there. But Felix Alvarado, if you had not watched this fight, it's on ESPN Plus. You can probably find it on YouTube or Daily Motion. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But go watch it. It's a 7-round fight, or at least it only lasted 7 rounds for the vacant IBF light flyweight title. And Alvarado, even though he has a couple losses on his resume against really good competition, he is still one of the most entertaining fighters in the planet. Anytime you see a fighter with a rat tail, you know they just bring it. Nico Macias, Felix Alvarado, Casazu, like the list goes on. Like prime Lucas Matisse. Like we can just bring it on. Like all the people with rat tails in boxing, they can fucking brawl. And Felix Alvarado can do that. God, these two guys went at it. Amazing body work from Alvarado, knocking Petecoron down multiple times to the body. 3 times in the single round before it was called off. Just amazing performance from Alvarado. Really great stuff from him, to be quite honest. We're going to go to the last boxing card of the weekend and then go to the MMA card and then one last news topic. So if you want to call in, 323-870-4051, press 1 to get in the queue, or email me, mixcommentradio@gmail.com to get a free international call-in link that is permanent, by the way. So I'm not going to talk too much about the John Ryder, Andre Sorkin fight, or card, I should say. I will say this. The Isaac Chamberlain, Luke Watkins fight, that was a fun fight. The Ted Cheeseman versus Asania Bayfield fight, that was a fun fight. I definitely cannot wait to see the Anthony Fowler, Ted Cheeseman fight. Other than that, not much to say about it, to be quite honest. Sorry. Main event, Mark saying who had that fight. I believe we're talking about the Fury and Pulev fight. That was ESPN Plus. ESPN Plus had that. Excuse me. Sorry. Parched throat there. But anyways, digressing. Let's go to the UFC Fight Night card. Anthony Smith versus Volkan Ozdemir. And I'll say this. I called it. Anthony Smith is here, ladies and gentlemen. And just because of that, I'm playing the 1940 celebration. Yes. Soak it in. We have, ladies and gentlemen, the reincarnation of Robbie Lawler, even though Robbie Lawler is obviously still with us and is still fighting. But Anthony Smith, a Midwestern journeyman that all of a sudden has turned it around, has a career renaissance, and now is obviously the top contender in the light heavyweight division. That first round, he was severely hurt by Ozdemir. Ozdemir was obviously a little bit tired after that, and then I think Anthony Smith started hurting him more in the second round. Third round, he got him down, and then it was quickly that rear naked choke. Daniel Cormier was on the Ariel Helwani show today and said, if you're Anthony Smith, you got to work on his cardio, and that's probably the only criticism I have is that he definitely seemed like he was tired after the first round, but Ozdemir was significantly more tired. But salute to Anthony Smith, man. Clearly the number one contender in the light heavyweight division. And if he fought a John Jones, Gustafsson winner, I would not be upset at all. And Anthony Walker out there listening, I want you on your show on Thursday to sort of hound Jason about how he shitted on my comparison to Robbie Lawler. And I just want to say, damn it, I was fucking right. And you all know it. Digressing, Michael Johnson defeating Artem Lobov via unanimous decision. Clearly just, outboxing him, which we all expected. I expected him to get the finish, though, which he did not. I sort of chalked that up to bad weight cut and sort of a short notice injury replacement fight. That was what he came in there for. Not injury replacement, but for the whole, Khabib McGregor brawl for Tukagov or whatever his name is, to be quite honest. Misha Serkinov versus Patrick Cummins. Great submission in the first round for Misha Serkinov. And other than that, not much to really talk about. Sean Strickland picked up a really good TKO. Court McGee picked up a good win that he needed against Alex Garcia. Calvin Kattar continues to be a really good prospect. And then we're going to move into our last news of the day, ladies and gentlemen. One that is quite depressing. Santiago, Compa, I see you in the queue, but neither of you have pressed 1. If I wrap up this topic and neither of you guys have pressed 1, I'm just going to wrap up the show. 323-870-4051. Gary, I see you ducking the call because you picked Flanagan, so I'm just saying.
I want smoke!
We see the duck, Gary. But anyways, digressing. News of the day. Kell Brook's new opponent has been announced. And ladies and gentlemen, it is Michael Zerafa. You may remember him as being knocked out by Peter Quillin maybe almost a decade ago. Yeah, that's about it. Nothing really to talk about that one. So, what's sad is that, obviously, we all thought we were just gonna get Kell Brook for Samir Khan, and we're sort of hating on it in a way. I can't believe they found something worse than that, or significantly worse. And this is arguably worse than the fucking Rabchenko fight. But anyways, that's just some horse shit. I see you, Gary, calling in. Just because you're calling in late trying to duck that smoke, we're going to Santiago first, and plus he called in first. Santiago, our occasional co-host of Mixed Combat Radio. How are you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Just another day here at work, trying to make it a payday at this point. Eager to call back in and talk about this past Saturday's fights. Long as day, really, boxing-wise, at least with the DAZN card and the HBO cards. You almost thought, too, because there were 3 4-rounders, that maybe we would get a nice synchronicity to it. And instead, no, they managed to just fill it in to make it overlap.
I will say this, though. My really, big critique of DAZN so far is that their pacing isn't really, a streaming pace. They still have, a very, terrestrial TV sort of pace to it. They put in a lot of promos, a lot of ads in between fights. Not really ads, but DAZN ads, it's promos for future cards, all that stuff. They just fill it and they repeat it over and over again. And that makes the card last so much longer. Plus they go back to no shot at Chris Mannix and I forget her name, Kay Adams. But they go back to them constantly for takes on the action when they should just move cards along. And World Boxing Super Series has that same issue. They just take forever when they could just sort of expedite the show. You're on a streaming platform. You don't need to wait this long for fights.
Yeah, it reminds me when we would be watching the Fox Sports pacing, remember?
It's the same pacing. I remember I forget what card it was. I think it was the Jesse Vargas one. Thomas Olemi. I went back and watched that full card. The shit was 8+ hours long. That's too long. No one, look, I am a rabid, degenerate combat sports fan. Your individual fight card should not be longer than 4 to 6 hours. You can have multiple of them in a day. We can have 4 of those in a day, and I'm okay with that. But they should only be 4 to 6 hours, tops.
Yeah, they could do some research there and how the UFC does it, because their pacing isn't as bad, even if they are almost as long, if not just a little under the mark.
Well, it's like UFC Fight Pass cards or pay-per-view cards. Like it's just a significant difference in how they're paced. Other than like the recent one with Canelo Triple G, where we had an hour and a half wait time. Most of the time, pay-per-views are pretty quick. Like, they expedite that shit. Like, you already paid for it. Like, there's no point in keeping you here for extra period of time. You've already paid for the event. Like, ad revenue doesn't go up with watch time for a pay-per-view. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah, true.
But anyways, Santiago. Santiago. Let's get to the fights. Jacobs, Derevyanchenko. Let's start with that. What are your thoughts about it?
Damn, man, it's something when you can make someone's cardio very evident in the slow motion, because goddamn was that man taking some breaths in between some of those motions. Because I was just looking at Derevyanchenko when he would be pressing against Jacobs, and while he did have the right approach to keep Jacobs from trying to mount an assault on him, you could easily see that he was basically just doing that to conserve energy and keep him from doing anything so that he could get the center going. Because in that 12th round, he kind of did let loose, but it was just kind of like too little too late at that point for me. And kudos to Jacobs getting the IBF belt. Obviously now titleist. He's got a myriad of options. He's already said he wants Canelo, and maybe gives a rematch to GGG if he wins. And, both guys look good. Derevyanchenko definitely looked good, despite the fact that, it wasn't as competitive as I thought it could have been. But still, kudos to him for putting on a good fight with Jacobs. And I look forward to seeing both guys again. Co-main event, Albert Machado, Yondale Evans. God damn, man. That first round knockout definitely came out of nowhere for me. Albert Machado pretty much established himself as a player at 130, and I can only imagine how well he'll do against the other 130-pound champions. But I do kind of wonder what led to his decision to say that he wants to fight Francisco Vargas. I think Vargas is already, going out at this point. He hasn't looked as good since his back-to-back wars with Salido and Burchelt.
I think
your thoughts on that?
I think he picked Vargas because Vargas has probably the closest thing you have to sort of that veteran status in the division. Similar to guys wanting to fight on the come up, like a Denis Lebedev. Like Gassiev wanted to fight Lebedev on the come up. Even Usyk wanted to fight Lebedev on the come up. Like a lot of young cruiserweights wanted to fight Lebedev. Why? Because he has some sort of histrionics with the division. Francisco Vargas is the closest thing to that. His wars with Mura and Salido are fights that we will probably never forget. And I think if you're a guy like Machado, if you're a guy like Burchelt, who obviously beat Francisco Vargas, that's a name that matters on your resume in terms of like long term. It's the closest thing to an Anthony Joshua Klitschko in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely get that. Very impressive work. Look forward to seeing who he takes on next. And obviously, me, a longtime supporter of women's boxing. Happy to see the rematch with Heather Hardy and Shelly Vincent. Wasn't as good as their first fight was, but still, it was a good fight. Kudos to Heather winning her first world title, to my understanding. And I agree with you that she should definitely look, now that she's 36, for cash-out fights. She's got a belt, so she could probably lure another 126-pound titleist to unification, make some good money, and then call it a career from there, because she's done well for herself, and in her own words, at one point she was homeless, and now she had a billboard in New York to promote her fight. So kudos to her, women's boxing, with everything that has been happening for them.
I will say this. If anyone over there at either in Heather Hardy's camp or in Serrano's camp or in whoever's camp is smart, they make that fight on the zone, and the winner of that fight's Katie Taylor. I'm just saying. Like, that makes the most sense in the world.
I agree with you. Definitely agree with you on there. And then the zone card, Regis Prograis, Terry Flanagan. Regis looked exactly what I expected him to look in that fight. Terry Flanagan, one tough son of a bitch in there. did not really have much of an answer, and you could see that while it was obviously a great show of skill, god damn how Regis made that almost look simple and easy, like if he was just like only exuding as much as he needed to win that fight. I remember there was a Showbox card I saw him in once where he went the distance and he looked dominating. And I remember I think when they interviewed him about that, he said that the reason that happened was because he was just bored. And then we saw what he did with Julius Ndongo, where he blasted him out in 2 rounds. So definitely the favorite. He's my initial pick against Kiro Relic, and definitely think that Josh Taylor takes it over Iron Branchik. I think Iron Branchik's going to be a good fight for Taylor, but I think this is a fight that Taylor should win.
Absolutely agree. Any thoughts on the Hughie Fury fight or the Felix Alvarado fight?
No more than what you've already stated, because I'd rather weren't on my radar. And I'm a heavyweight, so that says a lot for me.
Well, is that it, Santiago?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. You get on to the other guys. Nice to call back in again. Everybody subscribe, hit like, share the show, and show your support. Talk to you later, dude.
Thank you, Santiago. Talk to you later, man. Unfortunately, Compa dropped off. That's sad, man. Compa's an OG legend in the house. So, Compa, if you listen on the playback, just know you're the man. LA royalty over there. Moving on to Gary in Dallas. Ah, man.
I want smoke.
Oh, Gary. I'm just playing, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you, bro?
I'm good, man. Shout out to Prograis, right?
Yeah, shout out to Prograis. I mean, he looked a lot better. I thought he was going to lose the fight at mid-distances. I thought he was going to lose the battle of the jabs. And he won every aspect of the fight. And I thought Flanagan, after round 5, I thought Flanagan won the 5th round, and you could make a case that he won the first. So I was like, okay, he's got to pick it up now because he's not out of the fight, right? Theoretically, he might only be down 3-2, but he's got to pick it up. And he never picked up the pace. He never switched up his game plan. He just seemed content on losing every round and not getting knocked out.
That's not what it was. I can understand why you thought that, but that's not what it was. This was similar, and like it's just now like a term now in the boxing world. It's like a Lomachenko fight. Like Prograis made him look so silly in there and so amateur in there that the demoralization effect it had, the morality effect it had, that's what really zapped Flanagan more so than the punches. Even though Flanagan was getting caught with some really heavy shots throughout the fight, it just wasn't really combinations. But all the jabs were hard from Prograis. Everything that he was landing was hard shots. The body work was hard from Prograis. But it was the inefficiency that Prograis was able to sort of cause on Flanagan that led to that perception you have, Gary, that Flanagan was just not being able to land. And if you've ever been in the gym or been sparring or you've been in there with a fight with somebody and you just cannot land, it zaps your energy just from your mind. Your mind starts thinking, I can't land on this guy. I can't hit him. Like, think about the amount of jabs that Flanagan just missed. When you aren't able to land your jab like that, your whole game falls apart. And for a guy like Terry Flanagan, whose whole game is predicated off the jab, you can see how important that aspect is. He relies on it so heavily, and when it's not there, his entire game suffers. I think it's more so that than he didn't want to engage or he didn't want to sort of step it up. He couldn't. He wasn't landing. And if you're not landing, you can't step it up.
That's certainly true. But there was never any, I mean, who knows if Flanagan will ever get another shot. Well, I guess this wasn't for a legitimate world title, but who knows if he will ever get another shot to fight for a legitimate world title.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he wasn't going to win the fight on the inside. I guess he wasn't going to win the fight at mid-distance or the outside either. I don't know what he was going to do, but, like, you have to try something different, right? I mean, I like to use the example of Canelo and Mayweather. And Canelo thought it would be a smart move to try to outbox Mayweather. Like, after 4 or 5 rounds, don't you just decide, okay, I have to do something different? Like, this is it. This is my chance. I may never get this opportunity again. I don't know.
Gary, you're partly right, but we have to understand that ability, that adaptability that a boxer would have to sort of throw away their entire game plan or their entire style mid-fight to sort of come from behind, like the 1% or the 0.001% are only able to really do that at the high level. Flanagan, again, doesn't really have anything else but jab, right hand, left hook, rinse and repeat. Right? Like, he is a very basic fighter. So when you take that away from him, he can adapt. What is he going to fall back to? He doesn't have anything else to fall back to. He's not an elite fighter.
You're right. He's not. And I thought he was I thought his jab was better than it looked. I thought he was quicker. Because he wasn't quicker than Prograis either. I mean, Prograis landed first. There was nothing that Flanagan could do to win that fight. I agree with that. I want to give you an example, and I don't even know if you remember this fight because it was so irrelevant. But when John Molina fought Terrence Crawford, you remember that fight? 4 or 5 years ago?
Yes.
Maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay. After the first round, Molina's like, okay, I have no shot in this fight at all. Like, there's no way I can outbox this guy. And from that point on, I don't remember how many rounds it went, but it went a few. Molina loaded up and went for the home run on every single punch he threw. But it was him realizing this is my chance. I can't outbox these guys, so I have to try something different.
But
he loaded up on every punch.
But Gary, I would argue that your example is evidence that I would use. Like, that's why fighters often fail at doing what you're saying. That's why it's so hard to adapt and just all of a sudden go for broke and be efficient at it. Because you're going to get caught. If you're being caught at will and you're being outclassed, and all of a sudden you're going to go for broke and ignore all defensive skill and technique, guess what? You're going to get caught more than likely. You're going to get hurt more than likely. And that's what happened with John Molina and Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford iced him not really iced him, but he finished him because of that. You know, Molina started going for broke and he became wild, and guess what happened? Crawford caught him. Kept catching him.
Yeah, but that was his only chance to win. Molina's only chance to beat Crawford was to land something huge. Right? He wasn't going to sit there. He wasn't going to put punches together. He wasn't going to put rallies together. His only chance was to catch him cold and knock him out. Mm-hmm. He had a home run. You know what I'm saying? The home run was his only chance. And I know Flanagan doesn't really have any power, so that probably wasn't going to fly either, right? Because at least Molina's a puncher. Flanagan's not really a puncher, so that wasn't going to work either. So, yeah, I just can't believe that how bad Flanagan looked. I mean, give that credit to Prograis, too. But really, I mean, pretty early on in that fight, you could tell that Flanagan had to do something drastically different, or he had zero chance in that fight. And I really thought it was going to be a really good fight. I thought it was going to be a contest of styles, and it wasn't. It was just one guy outclassing the other, which I was not expecting.
I said this to you in the chat. I'm going to repeat it here on the show just for our podcast listeners. But I'm not surprised. Like, I wasn't surprised by this fight. If anything, I'm surprised that Prograis, like Cameron said very early in the show, didn't sort of, when he hurt Flanagan and knocked him down, go into fourth gear and finish him. I felt like the opportunity was there. That's the only thing I was really surprised by. But Flanagan, who's coming into his toughest fight of his career, which is Prograis, off of his first career loss, to me is a massive red flag. Massive. So, it would have been very unlikely for Flanagan to come out here, I think, and to put on his career best performance against his career toughest opponent in coming off a loss. Like, all momentum is against Flanagan in this fight. All the X factors, not let alone athleticism, skill, technique, all those other sort of actual tangible things we can look at are, again, against Flanagan here. I think you just sort of overrated Flanagan. And I'll be honest, like, I did for a time. Like, I think everyone sort of overrated Flanagan. We thought he was going to beat Maurice Hooker, and he didn't. And when that happened, I jumped off the train immediately because I saw what I needed to see. I think this fight would probably be the nail in the coffin for, people that still believed in Flanagan to be an elite competitor. He just isn't, especially at this division. And he truly never was at 135.
that was probably. Can he get back down to 35, or is that did he grow out of that? Did he leave that weight class because he couldn't get any fights, or did he outgrow the weight class? Because
I think he
if
outgrew.
he's gonna have any success,
I think he outgrew the weight class because he's a pretty big guy. Like it's not like he was like at a size disadvantage with Prograis. That wasn't a factor. And let's be honest, it's not like 135 is an easier division for him. You know, we have Lomachenko, we have Mikey in recess because he's going off to 147, but Mikey's going to come back. Robert Easter, I think, beats Terry Flanagan pretty easily. You know, Denis Shafikov beats Terry Flanagan pretty easily. You know, there's a lot of guys that I think, you know, Richard Comey, I think, oh my God, imagine what he does to Terry Flanagan. Like,
now I think you're getting a little overboard. Like, who has, you said Easter, right? One of the names you said was Robert Easter?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, why is Robert Easter that much different than Terry Flanagan? I'm not saying that Easter wouldn't win, but like,
Easter to me
why is Easter that much different?
Easter to me has a better body of work when you just look at it as a whole, and I think a Richard Comey win is much better than a Magdaleno win, a Diego Magdaleno. Come on.
Okay. Okay. No one thinks he beat Comey. Did you watch that fight? Did you watch the Easter
I
fight?
thought Easter beat Comey. What do you mean no one?
Did
I
you?
do.
Did you think he beat Fortuna? Okay. Did you think he beat Fortuna?
That one's a little bit closer. That one's a little bit.
I thought he was.
But I'll put it this way: Javier Fortuna. You don't think he beats Terry Flanagan?
I was really high on Flanagan up until 2 days ago.
I know reality is a hard thing sometimes, Gary, but Terry Flanagan is a borderline top 10 competitor at 135 or 140. Borderline. He just is.
I think Comey beats him for sure. I think Easter's kind of a 50-50 fight. I think Linares beats him. I think all those guys beat him.
Come on.
Shafikov?
Come on. You said Easter. You said Easter Flanagan's 50-50. Really?
Either fighter could win. I don't think – I never was high on Easter. Like, I thought he lost to Comey. I thought he lost to Fortuna. I thought he took a real close decision over Shafikov. And does he have any other notable wins besides those three?
No.
So, like,
no.
You know what I'm saying? All of Easter's – I think Easter's best win was a loss to Mikey Garcia. I thought that was the fight that he looked the best in. I was never high on Easter. If I had to bet on Easter versus Flanagan, I might lean towards Easter. But if it's not 50-40, it's like 55-45. I think that's a very even fight between Easter and Flanagan, just like the Hooker fight was.
But see, I don't think the Hooker fight was competitive. I think it was anticlimactic, but at no point in that fight did Flanagan look like he was in the fight.
That's probably true. He was in the fight, but he wasn't out of the fight either. Yeah,
it was just let's be honest. The Hooker Flanagan fight just wasn't a good fight. Like that was a clinch fest. Like that was a low action, low output fight. You know, both guys didn't look that great out of it, but Hooker obviously I think was just in control. Like he was the one dictating the action, the pace.
It's something I picked Flanagan to beat Hooker, like you did. And I know Hooker personally. I've met him many times. He's a great guy. Mm-hmm. When he said it's a boring fight, I was on the edge of my seat because I like, oh, he's really going to win. Because I thought Flanagan was going to outclass him. So, like, when Hooker was doing that good, unless you have a vested interest in Hooker like I do, I guess I could see how you think the fight was boring. But, like, as a Hooker fan, as somebody who knows Hooker personally, I was really into that fight.
And plus, you're a Flanagan fan, too. So, like, you're a fan of both guys. I can definitely see why you would like that fight.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. Well, Gary, let's move off of that because, it's okay. We all pick fights that are wrong sometimes. It happens, you know. I don't have Crow.
This is David Lemieux, Billy Joe. We'll put that out there.
The worst part is I picked Gary Spike O'Sullivan because I was so pissed off because of that fight, because that David Lemieux, Billy Joe Saunders fight. And then I looked so much worse picking Gary Spike O'Sullivan. God, that reminds shots at me. God. And one little sniper shot for Gary. There we go.
I picked Spike Sullivan in that fight too until I saw them at the weigh-in, and Lemieux was about 20 times bigger than Spike. I said, "Oh, Lemieux's just gonna walk through him. He's too big for I don't know why Spike was fighting at 160, but
Yeah.
I mean, when they sit next to each other, it's like, yeah, Spike's in trouble.
You know what's sad is like I have met Spike a couple times, and like he's my height, and I know like I'm a small guy. Like I know it's kind of hard to tell maybe on video, even though I think it kind of is easy to tell. I'm a small dude. Like I'm only 5'9", 135 pounds, soaking wet, right? And Spike O'Sullivan's my height, and just obviously a little bit bigger. Like he's not a big guy, and I should have thought that. Anyways, digressing from that, Gary. Any more thoughts on the rest of the fights this weekend? Daniel Jacobs, Sergiy Derevyanchenko, Machado, Felix Alvarado, Huey Fury. What do you want to talk about?
The Huey Fury thing, I was high on him too, and he looked like crap too. I picked Huey Fury to win that fight. I was wrong about that too. But no, I had no thoughts. But that was a boring fight that isn't even worth mentioning. Jacobs Derevyanchenko, that was a good scrap. It was a little more competitive. I had it 114, 113 for Jacobs. I thought it was good. I had the knockdown in the first is different. And I like Jacobs. I just don't think that there's – I think all the other top middleweights, Andrade, Canelo, Charlo, Billy Joe, I think they all beat Jacobs. I think his title run is going to be real short. I don't know who they're going to put him in the room next.
Do you think he's not? Do you think he's not competitive with these guys, or do you think he just doesn't?
I think he's competitive. He's a great. Honestly, he's a great athlete. He's got decent top, good speed. He throws nice combination when he wants to. But I feel like he takes rounds off, and his style just doesn't impress the judges.
I mean, I agree with that. He does take rounds off.
So he can't sit there and outbox a guy like Billy Joe. So if he does that and he takes rounds off, he's going to lose the case to Billy Joe, right? If he takes rounds off of the guys like Charlo or Canelo, he could get knocked out. You know, Derevyanchenko is a swarmer. He's a good fighter, but Jacobs is a more skilled, more athletic, taller fighter, and that was the difference. That's why he was able to win most of the early rounds.
So you don't think Jacobs, due to his height, his reach, his power, his jab, doesn't have some sort of stylistic advantage against guys like maybe Canelo, who are shorter for the division?
He would have to. He gets inactive sometimes. I mean, it would be a stylistically a tough fight.
But time out, very quickly, Gary. You just said he takes rounds off. That is also the number one criticism of Canelo.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that same thing. It is. And Jim Lampley kept saying how, like, in the later rounds that Jacobs looks more fresh than Derevyanchenko. I'm like, I don't think that's the case. I thought Derevyanchenko won most of the later rounds. Yeah, Jacobs would have it. I feel like Jacobs doesn't do anything better than Canelo, other than he's taller. Like, that's his only advantage. I think Canelo's got a better jab. I think Canelo fights better on the inside. I think Canelo is more powerful. And we always talk about Jacobs' power. But who has he knocked out? Peter Quinn. Besides that, who has he knocked out at the elite level?
I know. I see what you're saying. You're making a great argument. I'm definitely not going to argue against it.
And I just think Charlo is better at Jacobs than everything. I mean, Charlo can be hit, but Jacobs can be hit too. We saw that with Derevyanchenko. So, I mean, I think whoever he fights next, assuming he's one of those top guys, is going to beat him. So, and I like Jacobs. So I'm not saying I'm being a hitter. I like Jacobs. It just doesn't seem like he puts it all together. It just seems like there's something missing. Like it's like Lenard. Lenard is this highly skilled fighter, but then he just loses. Like guys he can't lose to. I just feel like Jacobs would go in there with Andrade and would lose most of the round. I mean, I think Canelo could stop him. I think Charlo could stop him. I think Billy Joe would beat him. I just don't see him beat any of those guys.
Yeah, I think you made a great argument. Jacobs isn't like a destroyer in the division. Like I don't think anyone realistically thinks he comes in and beats all these guys. I just don't see that happening, and he hasn't thus far. Like he lost to Triple G, and even someone like me who think Jacobs arguably won that, you still have to say Triple G won that fight. He got the W in the record book. Like it is what it is. At the very least, if you're arguing that, he barely won the fight in your argument. So again, fights against prime Charlo, a prime Demetrius Andrade, Billy Joe Saunders on the comeback. These are all very tough fights, let alone, like you said, Canelo. And I think you made a very good argument that Canelo, other than the height and the reach sort of added elements, he does everything better than Jacobs. His defense is better. His offense is better. His combination work is better. His accuracy is better. His overall punching technique is a little more sound, a little more fundamental, in my opinion, as well. Less wild with his shots. His waist movement, head movement's probably a little bit better as well. His ability to slip shots is better. You made a good argument.
Then the last thing I would ask is, who do you think Jacobs is going to fight next? Do you think it's going to be Canelo? You think of the Mayo next? Is that the next time you think we see Jacobs?
I'm probably leaning Jacobs. Obviously, it's going to be, I think, a unification. I think it will be. It's either going to be Jacobs or Andrade. If I'm Canelo, I probably go towards Jacobs first. He's the more established guy in the division. Beating him, I think, right now is a little bit more respectable. Not respectable, that's probably a bad word. But it adds more clout than Andrade win at this point. Because Jacobs, let's be honest, he beat Derevyanchenko for this belt. Andrade beat Walter Katzendokwa. Like, there's a difference there. Jacobs has the fight with Triple G. Jacobs has a win over Peter Quillen. Like, beating Jacobs still matters in this division. Even though I think you made a good argument that Jacobs may lose to all these guys in the very top, he's still at the top right now. He's still in the top 5 right now. So I probably pick the Canelo fight, and also if you're Jacobs, why not take the Canelo fight if it's offered to you?
Yeah, if you're Jacobs, you definitely take it. And I think it's probably, outside of it, I told you with Triple G, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Jacobs is probably the biggest name out there. It's probably the biggest money fight for Canelo too, and Canelo would likely win it. So, yeah, why not take that fight? I mean, I don't think Canelo wants to jump in. I think if you ask Canelo to pick between Billy Joe, Charlo, Andrade, or Jacobs, I think he would pick Jacobs, and the biggest money fight of the thing. So, I think that makes the most sense.
I agree. Anything else, Gary?
That's all I got.
Thank you, Gary. Have a good one, man. See you later. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today. Quick little PSA as we wrap up. Obviously, things in the world have been a little bit crazy outside of boxing with what's happened in Pittsburgh, with the tragedy there. Obviously, prayers, condolences to everyone over there. What happened at the Kroger store, recently as well. The election in Brazil, obviously having probably more of a MMA connection and ramifications to it, where a president has been elected that said he's going to increase police murders, said things that I'm a rapist, but you don't deserve to be raped to a female reporter. Just some bad things are happening around the world. I hope this is an escape. If you know me, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm much more vocal about this stuff outside the show. Mainly because this show I want to, again, be that escape. A, for me, because it's an escape from all the politics and the outside stuff in the world, and for you guys and you ladies. Though, I might be starting a political podcast soon. Or just a pop culture, just a world news sort of podcast where we talk about anything like daily events and daily news and stuff like that. That's in the works. Just saying. As well as the website for this show, some other things I'm working on, a lot of things in the work, so keep your eyes out. Matt Hunter MCR, all platforms to follow me. Hipsters here, haters beware. Have a great day. Peace.